Good morning. My name is George DeRosa, past commander of the American Legion, Post 162 here in Hillsdale, and I'm interviewing Vincent McCarthy, also a past commander of our post. It's Saturday, the 21st of April, 2012, and Vinny, the first question would be, where were you born?
I was born in Pearl River, New York.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Pearl River.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What schools did you attend?
Oh, they only had one school, and it was captured kindergarten right up through high school, and it was Pearl River High School.
And did you participate in sports?
Yeah, I played a little freshman football, a little freshman baseball. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were you good?
I don't think so.
What age were you when you enlisted in the Navy?
Well, actually, I joined when I was actually 16. They told me I had to wait until I was 17 to get in. So, but by the time my 17th birthday come around, I was gone. I went down to I think it was Court Street in the city, New York, yeah. And we got interviewed by a bunch of sailors down there, and I thought I was going to be home that night. And I said, what can I do? Can I go home now? He says, you're not going anywhere, sailor. You're going to Great Lakes, Illinois. Uh-huh. I had to call my mother and tell her I won't be home.
Yeah. Given your age, did your parents have to sign?
Not really. In those days, they didn't seem to really press on that issue, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
But my mother did give consent.
Yeah.
So it either the signature consent or a regular verbal consent.
All right.
Yeah.
And that was in July 1948?
Yes, sir.
And when were you discharged?
June of '52.
And that was out of where?
Out of Norfolk, Virginia.
All right.
Yeah.
So you served 4 years?
Just close, yeah,
Okay.
just 4 years.
And where did you take basic training? Where did you take boot camp?
I went to Great Lakes, Illinois, and they put us in a camp called Camp Moffett. It was a camp that originally was for the waves during the war. And of course, a wave is a naval sailor, only she's female.
Did they still leave the curtains up in the barracks?
No, I don't think so. I think they had all that ready, refurbished for us.
And you mentioned you played in your company band.
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I was a pivot drummer for the company band, Company 292. And we played in downtown Chicago, and I believe we played in Milwaukee, Illinois, on a couple of Saturdays in October or early November. Mm-hmm. I guess they were just general parades. I can't recall exactly why. But yeah, we had a nice drum and bugle corps.
And what instrument did you play?
I played the drums, yeah.
Okay.
Drummer boy.
Vinny, what ships did you serve on?
I served on the USS Coral Sea. In November of that year, of 48, they sent us on a train from Chicago all the way down to Virginia. It was a 2-day deal. And I went aboard the USS Coral Sea in November of 1948. And
you mentioned that the Coral Sea was a CVB. What's a CVB?
CVB in those days was carrier battle. Now there's CVE and CVA and all those terms, which I'm not familiar with, but the CVB was when I was on that particular ship.
And I understand she was of the Essex class?
Yes, she was part of the Essex class, the prettiest ship afloat.
What was the armament like aboard the aircraft carrier?
We had pretty good armament. We had, I believe it was five inch guns. I think there was 3 and 2 or 2 and 3 on each side. And we had 5 3-inch 50s, which were the quads.
Right.
And they pumped this way, and they were all controlled by radar. They'd move as fast as you could shake a stick at.
Right.
And they were accurate, very accurate.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the ship carried Marine personnel, combat?
Yeah, at one point during the 50s, it was early 50, I guess it was 51, we were over in the Med, and we took over with us a whole group of 800 combat-ready Marines, ready to go anywhere in the European theater, I'm sure, wherever they were sent.
Right.
That was the Cold War problem in those days. Tripoli was on fire.
And how many men did the carrier carry total?
Well, yeah, we had a complement of 5,000 men.
Okay.
Yeah.
You probably
5,000
wouldn't
men.
meet your own brother on that ship.
Oh, I
come
don't
on.
think I wasn't on everywhere in that ship at all.
Yeah.
There was areas I'd never been to.
And what were your duties aboard ship?
I was a snipe, which is actually it's a nickname for a machinist mate. But the snipes are the greasy kids that work away down underneath, and they're full of grease all the time and oil.
Yeah. What was your work day like? What did you do?
Well, to get up in the morning, we actually worked 4 on and 8 off. And let's say it was a particular morning, my duty was 8 o'clock. 8 to 12 I'd be working, and I would report to my engine room, number 4, where I was stationed. And I would go to my station and make sure everything's functioning properly, and keep an eye on a half a dozen different gauges to make sure nothing fails. And I would be relieved at the end of my shift.
Right.
And that was basically my day, plus cleaning and oiling and, general things like that. Once in a while, we got an opportunity to get familiar with the steering of the steam coming into the turbines. It let us see how we do on that. When the captain called for a certain speed, the engine room would be notified, give us 25 more knots or something like that. And you could increase the steam to the turbines, which was all part of the
You said
machinist mate.
your job was in engine room number 4, so there were 3 other engine rooms?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Was number 4 in forward or aft?
1, 2, 3, and 4. They were almost side by side.
Okay. And you mentioned about your...
GQ is what they call to and refer to as general quarters. It's a term that's issued when the ship is under attack or imminent danger to be attacked.
Okay.
General quarters, general quarters. Now hear this. All men report to your station, general quarters. Pretty
Brings back
interesting.
memories.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And where was your general quarters?
My GQ station was what they call a shaft alley. On number 4 shaft, I had to go down 4 decks from where I worked into the shaft alley, and there was oil pumps on each bearing that were drip pumps. They just dripped constantly. Those drip pumps had to be checked and filled all the time. And of course, that's when we had to make our rounds, the duty rounds. That was one of our jobs, to go down there and make sure they're all full, the oil cups. They were about that big around and about that big, and they just dripped. A drop of oil in the bearing every so often.
Yeah. What piqued my, when we were talking previously about where you were in your GQ station, I was always topside, being in the Navy supply department.
Right.
So when I hear the bilges, I think the bottom, and you said you were how many decks below the bilges?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you also said that was the safest part of the ship. Why? Especially in a storm.
Well, when you're on the bottom there like that, you don't feel the roll like you would on the top deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the heat?
The heat was warm. It was always warm.
Yeah.
130, 120. Yep.
That's warm.
That's warm.
Yeah.
That's warm.
Was your ship ever in danger, Vinny?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, it wasn't in danger during the period that I was on her. But she did get a lot of ribbons during the 70s, late 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did mention coming back from Europe, running into a hurricane.
Yes, I did. We come back, I believe it was in 1950, 51. We were off the coast of the Carolinas, heading towards Norfolk. And we started to get a real bad storm coming, and the captain, I don't know whether he thought he could beat it or he thought it wouldn't be as bad as it was, but boy, we got stuck. We got stuck. They couldn't get all the aircraft off. It got too bad too quick. A lot of the aircraft were left on the flight deck, and of course they were snapped right off, It was such a tremendous storm that we took a roll. The ship took a roll like this. It was calculated at 45 degrees. Now, that was done on paper, but it was never done physically until that particular day we hit that storm, and that
That's
happened.
a pretty big roll for an aircraft
Wow.
carrier.
And we bounced back, George. We bounced, well, obviously.
Yeah. You also mentioned that while you lost planes in the storm, you also lost planes that were in training.
Oh, well, we did. During the different cruises in the Med for practicing gunnery and all that, we had a whole group of Marines come aboard, young Marine pilots who were attempting to learn how to fly onto a carrier. And unfortunately, during the night flight quarters, we lost quite a few young men.
Yeah.
It was an unfortunate situation. Even during the day, you'd have one down or one gone. You know, it was those young guys that did that were above and beyond.
And was this daytime training or nighttime training?
Both. Yeah. And then we had we pulled a big skid and they dive bombed it with I don't know what they used, something like a 10-pound bag or something. I don't know. But they dive bombed a skid for practice.
Uh-huh. And you mentioned since you visited in Europe, Gibraltar, Algiers. What was some of the other ones?
Oh yeah, we went to Tangiers, Algiers. We went to Oran. We went to Greece. We went to Crete. We went to Istanbul, Turkey. We went to the French Riviera, Cannes, and Nice. We went to Italy, Palermo, Sicily, Augusta, Sicily, Leghorn, Gibraltar. Yeah, the whole works.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have to interject this personal thing. I think every Navy guy at a boot camp wants to be assigned to an aircraft carrier to make that 6-month med cruise to Vincent.
Yeah,
But,
beautiful.
You were lucky. I was not. Something unusual happened when you were in France.
When I was in France, it was a Sunday. They were looking for an extra shore patrol guy to go out because the guy that was supposedly go with this young Lieutenant J.G. Was sick. So he grabbed me, and the first time I ever went out on shore patrol. But it was a very quiet night. It was a Sunday, and no incidents at all.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Did you carry what we call a billy club? Or
We carried a
45?
club, yeah. The officer had his sidearm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the overall opinion of your officers that you served?
I thought they were a great bunch of people. By all means, my chief was very good. He was very businesslike. He didn't want to get close to anybody, but he was pleasant and he was caring. But you couldn't get close to him.
And why was that, do you think?
I don't know. I guess it was his probably during the war. You know, when he was in active battle and whatnot, and saw too much, and he didn't want to really get to know too many guys.
Yeah.
I can only think like that.
Right. The decorations and commendations and medals that you received, any?
Well, I got the European Theater that I know of, and I'm not sure what else. They gave out a lot of different medals since I've been out.
Right.
For different things, and
You mentioned the National Defense Medal.
yeah, national defense and things like that. Yes.
What was one of the funniest experiences you had when you were in the Navy, having to do with Liberty off a Caribbean island?
Yeah, as a result of hard work and a lot of general quarters time on practicing and maneuvering, they treated us to a beer party. And they took us to an isolated island, I guess, and They anchored off the coast and brought us in by motor whaleboats. And they gave us all the beer we could drink, and they had food and everything, but we did Taiwan on. Everybody, I think, at the party was wiped out.
What was the most inspiring experience? You mentioned about going topside one morning with the sunset and...
Oh, yes, yes, I remember that distinctly. That left an impression on me, how awesome it was. I was killing time out on one of the sponsor decks, which is a deck where you can walk out on, and it's kind of curlicue sometimes, and it's railed. And you can stand out there and just lean on the railing and look over, killing time for the shower line to go down. The sun was coming up, it was a beautiful morning. And next thing I noticed, there's 3 or 4 dots coming at me, right on the edge of the water, 4 dots. And as I looked, and the sun coming down, the blue water, all of a sudden these dots were right on me, and they were, wow. There were 4 F4U4s.
Yeah.
They were buzzing the ship for some reason, I don't know.
Corsairs.
I'm sorry, Corsairs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Those were the
The gull wing.
The Gulf wing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what George Bush used to fly.
That's right, yeah. The most person that you remembered the best from the service, you mentioned Donald Lamour.
Yeah, that's an interesting man. He came in just about the same time I did. I didn't know him that well in boot camp, but I know he was in the same boot camp in the same company. But I didn't know I was going to meet him on the ship. Well, of course, we did meet, and we became very good friends. He was a brilliant young man for his, God. He came from Fort Kent Mills in Maine, up on the border, I guess, Canadian.
Yeah.
Probably wood hunters, you know, woodsmen. But he came in as a seaman like myself. Within the first several months, he's walking around with petty officer 3rd class. The next thing I know, a few months later, he's 3rd class, now he's 1st class. And within the 2 or 3 years that I was on, he ended up becoming a chief. Wow. And I'm sure